Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Teach Them Diligently podcast. I am your host, Leslie Nunnery, and I am so grateful that you've chosen to join me here today. We have a special episode because we're going to really dive into the topic of marriage and, specifically the fact that there are no perfect marriages, but there are a lot of things that we can do to focus on our marriage, to invest in our marriage, and to really tend that most important physical relationship that we have here on earth. So I'm excited to welcome Jill Savage to the show today. Jill is passionate about encouraging, educating, and equipping families and marriages. She served in church ministry for 20 years, and now she and her husband are meeting the needs of families as authors, speakers, and coaches. They're known for their honesty, humor, and practical teaching. They bring hope and encouragement to every audience. Jill is the host of the No More Perfect podcast and the author of 16 books, including the best-selling No More Perfect Moms. So, Jill, welcome to the podcast today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Leslie.
Well, you're welcome. I am really, really glad to have you. I know we've been trying to get together for a while, but I remember hearing you speak at a conference several years ago and just really enjoying the way that you delivered truth. So tell us a little bit about how God has brought you to this point. Give us a little insight into your family, and then I look forward to diving into talking a little bit about, marriage and that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, my husband and I like to say that we've been married 41 years, 31 of them happily. And and it wasn't that there were 10 bad years in a row, but there were hard seasons.
Sure.
And there were ups and there were downs, and there were seasons that we sought help. And there was a really, really hard season that happened about 13 years ago, and we got through to the other side. And so that is important to us to talk about the real stuff of marriage, the places where we've gotten stuck. My husband and I are full-time marriage coaches. That's what we have done now for the last 7 years. We use a lot of the wisdom that we gained the hard way in helping people to get to the other side of their challenges. We're the parents of 5 children, and they range from 39 to 27, and they are some of them are the parents of 6 grandkids. So we're in that grandparenting season of life. We absolutely love it and thoroughly enjoy really honestly the empty nest season of life that we're experiencing, and so much of the benefits that we had of being intentional when we were raising our kids, which did include off and on homeschooling. We homeschooled for a reason and for a season, and found that was what was right for our family. But that's where we are. That's who we are. Oh, and we live in Normal, Illinois. So we have a lot of fun with that name. Yes, our kids, went to a normal school, and we go to a normal church. We have a lot of fun. But what we really want is to help people understand the normal stuff in marriage and how to get to the other side of it.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good. And I appreciate the fact that you are very honest about the fact that there were ups, there were downs, and you did seek help. I think there's so much of a stigma around seeking help in any area of our lives nowadays. You should be able to get through it, make it through it. But God gave us resources. God has put us or allowed us to live in a time where help is readily available. And these relationships are really important to invest in. And so the fact that you all sought help and that you are now available for help, I really appreciate your bringing that up, because I think it's really important to note.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, some of us maybe our family of origin said, in fact, this was true for my husband. You don't talk to people about your problems.
Yeah.
So
what happens in the family stays in the family.
All of that.
Yep.
And so sometimes it is hard for us to get help, because in the back of our head, we hear that, And or we didn't see our parents get help, and honestly, that was a different generation too. I think it is more acceptable to do that now, but sometimes it's still hard, because it is hard to be honest and
Yeah.
vulnerable about what's going on inside, or inside of ourselves, or what's going on inside of our relationship. It's a little scary, and you're sometimes going, who can we trust?
Mm-hmm.
And we find that, particularly, we do a lot of marriage coaching for pastors and their wives. And that is, well, because my husband was a pastor for 20 years. That's one reason. But the second reason is we're a safe place that's not in their community.
Right. Right.
And sometimes you have to find those.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the stress and strain on marriages in general is intense. But if you're in the ministry, if you are if you are intentional in serving people, whether it is in full-time Christian service or in any other, you're intentionally discipling your kids, the enemy is going to be really keyed in on that because your family is a high value target to him. And so there are going to be attacks. There are going to be a lot of pitfalls that you can fall into. And if you just keep brushing stuff under the rug, if you just keep gutting your way through it and never actually getting to the root of it, I fear that for far too many families, they're now living in the reality of a marriage that isn't functioning the way they dreamed that it would.
Yes, I absolutely agree. In fact, I like to think of the marriage as, if you're bowling, you want to hit that front pin, right?
Mm,
You want to hit right there at the front, because that's where you're likely going to get a strike. Well, it's the same way, I think, the marriage is that front pin in the
mm,
family. And if the enemy can take that pin down, then he can take down the rest of the family. And so we have to say, no, we're going to fight for
yeah,
our relationship, whether that's just simply saying we're going to prioritize it, and we have to make sure that we are taking time to invest in it, or whether that is saying, no, we're going to get the help that we need.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, totally agree. And I was just wondering, as you were talking, you all have been married, you said, I believe, for 41 years.
41 years.
39 that we're happy, or that we're
uh 31 that we're happy.
31 that I was like, wait a second, I just quoted you on that. So
Yep.
you've been around the block a time or two. Your book is entitled No More Perfect Marriages, but have you ever seen a perfect marriage?
They don't exist.
I know.
No, they don't exist. But sometimes we think they do, because we have a tendency to compare our insides to other people's
Mm,
outsides.
yeah, that's so good.
And when we do that, we come up with wrong conclusions. So we see people at church, we see people at the homeschooling co-op, we see their outsides, and we think, oh, they don't have any problems. Oh, if only my husband was like that husband,
Right.
or if only my kids were like those kids, or if only my wife was like that wife, then we wouldn't have any troubles at all. Like, we tell ourselves that. And really, comparison is one way that the enemy builds discontentment in our heart.
Yeah.
And it's so dangerous for us to be looking around and then comparing the insides of our marriage, the insides of our family, to the outsides of others who are putting on their best foot forward on a Sunday morning or at co-op. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and we all struggle.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the other side of that too is we are very quick to compare when the realities and the personalities and really just the makeup of our families are so different that
Yeah.
comparison is just a horrible trap because there aren't as many similarities there in when you get really down deep in the weeds of how we're made up as we may think.
Right. You're exactly right. Different temperaments, different personalities. One of the things that we have found that has made a huge difference in understanding the dynamics in marriage is also attachment styles.
Hmm.
And attachment styles come from the home of origin. So my husband grew up in a home that produced anxious attachment in him.
Hmm.
I grew up in a home that produced avoidant attachment in me. So, to simplify it, we like to say that he is a dog and I am a cat. And so we had this dog and cat relationship that was honestly not always working well.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is we want to leave behind anxious and avoidant, and we want to become secure.
Hmm.
And so again, that's playing out that we don't see and we don't understand, because it's very likely that there's different attachment styles that are playing out behind the scenes in these other relationships that we're also not aware of.
Wow, I'd actually never heard that broken out that way. And I would love to have you explain that just a little bit more so that
Mhm.
people can understand, okay, what are some other styles? What are some other ways that that may manifest itself to people who are like, whoa, 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 what did she just say? Because
Yeah,
I was
I'll
like,
tell
whoa,
you
whoa, whoa,
what.
whoa, what did she just say?
Yeah, it was when we began to understand attachment, it was such a game changer in our
Mm,
marriage. In fact, it came out of when we had our deepest, darkest crisis about 13 years ago. And as we were healing from that, was the first time we'd ever heard of this.
mm,
And so usually there are very few of us that honestly come out of our family of origin with secure attachment. Very few of us. There are some, but there's not a whole lot. And so we look at that, our family of origin, not to blame, but to understand.
yeah.
Like to understand. Like I grew up in a loving home, a loving family, Christ-centered home, Christ-centered family. Every time the church doors were open, we were there.
Mm,
However, we didn't do emotion.
mm,
We were the buck up family. So if life got hard, you just bucked up. And so what that did is I viewed that as a strength. I viewed that as, hey, that's the best way to handle life, because you don't get your emotions in the way, and
mm.
and you just put one foot in front of the other, and you're very resilient. And there is some good aspects to that.
Sure. Yeah.
But it also made me not a very compassionate wife
Mm,
and not always a compassionate mom.
mm.
I was more a buck up mom. You just need to do it, and not focusing on, hey, what's going on inside of
Yeah.
you? And so when I began to move from avoidant to secure, I found a balance. Instead of squashing my emotions down, I found that I could embrace them, that God gave them to me. And I needed to understand them, and that vulnerability happens in relationships, whether we're talking parent child or whether we're talking husband wife.
Yeah.
um, Vulnerability is the heart of that. And if you can't be compassionate and you can't be sensitive, it's very hard to be vulnerable and
Mm,
therefore connected. And so that was huge for me to understand. So I was the cat in the relationship. And if you think about cats, cats are kind of like, hey, give me some
yeah.
distance. Like, you're really needy. Would you just back off a little bit? And if a cat is married to a dog and the dog is like wagging its tail going, hey, pay attention to me. Come talk to me. Come engage with me. That's what dogs tend to do. And about 80% of marriages are dogs married to cats.
Hmm.
And so that dog is the anxious attachment. And so what does that look like? Well, usually that somebody with anxious attachment is going to come from an upbringing where maybe they had a reactive parent. Maybe they had a overprotective parent, like a helicopter parent.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there was divorce in their family of origin, and they were standing at the door waiting for dad to come, and maybe he didn't even come.
Mm.
Maybe there was a lot of arguing. There's a lot of reasons that we can end up in that anxious attachment place. And that was my husband. So he came from a divorced family. There was never enough connection in the primary relationships to
Mm.
really satisfy
Yeah.
his heart and his need. And so therefore, as he came into marriage, he's always looking for more connection because he's got this big hole in his heart that he's
Wow.
trying to fill. And so that's what that anxious attachment looks like. And I had no idea, going into our marriage, that Mark had that big hole, but it
Mm.
became really evident as we were, and that I had that buck up mindset. It became evident as he was kind of chasing me, and I was kind of going, "Hey, man, give me some
Yeah.
space." And so there was this major disconnect that we never understood. Why is this happening? What is going on? And so the beautiful thing is Jesus was the first secure connector.
Mm.
He is secure attachment. And the more we become like Christ, the more, and what does that look like when we're secure? Well, we can set boundaries. You see Jesus setting boundaries when he would say, "No, we're not going to go to that city. We're going to go over here." Or when he would get up early in the morning and go spend time with the Lord, and when he would even go to bed at night, knowing not everybody was healed and not everybody was saved. And um, so boundaries is a part of secure connection. Secure connectors get their value from Christ. They're
Mm.
not they're not looking for their spouse to make them feel good about themselves. They're not looking for other people to make them feel good about themselves. They have a balance between their emotions. So their emotions aren't running the show like often is happening in anxious attachment, but their emotions also aren't squashed
Right.
like what
Right.
is often happening in avoidant attachment.
Mm.
And so our goal is obviously to become more like Jesus, but also to recognize that as we become more like Christ, we become more secure.
Oh, that is so good. Yeah, and even just thinking about that, the more that we become like Jesus, the more those differences fall away as we get closer and closer to that perfect, secure relationship that we are trying to forge. That is really, really encouraging and well noted. Do you find as you are working with families that most of the time people come to you in their marriage having really no idea what's just something is wrong and they just can't put their finger on it? Is that a common thing?
Oh, it's really common. And it's why we often wait too long to get help.
Yeah.
The average couple waits 7 years to get help.
Wow. Wow.
7 years. And let me tell you that from a marriage coaching perspective, which is what we're doing, is we're helping a lot of these couples who have waited a long time, and you have a lot to dig through.
Yeah.
When you've waited 7 years, you now have resentment.
Mm.
You now have layers and layers of hurt. And so oftentimes that's one reason. It's like something's just off. I don't know what it is. And then we believe it'll just go away.
Mm.
It'll just go away. So we don't know what it is, so we put it off. The second reason that the second thing that happens too, when you said people get help and they're like, this is what's going on, but I can't put my finger on it, is that's why we sometimes need outside help.
Yeah.
We need somebody who can pan back, who can look at the big picture, who can understand, oh my gosh, yes, these are the dynamics that are playing out. These are the things that are happening in your relationship. And once we share those and we help them to see them, they go, oh my gosh, That makes so much
Right.
sense. I can
Right.
see that now.
Oh, I'm sure. And it's just like in parenting, if you go for the root of something and you keep going to what's really going on there, you're not going to let that
Yes.
go until it's developed into full-blown bitterness, rebellion, whatever, before you start trying to figure that out. It's that or probably it's more important within your marriage because it's easier to let that go. You don't see the behaviors the same way. And it's also easy, I would imagine, to get really distracted and to just keep sweeping stuff under the rug because if you have children, there's always someone else for you to get that love and attention from. And so you're able for a season to keep pushing that to the side.
You're exactly right, Leslie. You're exactly right. And unfortunately, that's what happens. Do you know that it's interesting that 60% of the couples that come, so we host marriage intensives in addition to the marriage coaching that we do online. And a marriage intensive is where a couple comes and they spend 3 days with us.
Hmm.
And we just work with them, just, Mark and I with that couple for 3 days, and we're digging into the dynamics of their marriage. And 60% of them are empty nesters
Hmm.
who have raised their kids, and they've realized that the kids have been a buffer for the issues in the marriage. The kids have kind of run interference for that.
Yeah.
And now there's no more interference. And they're realizing that they've spent, many of them, in fact, one of the things we talk about in our No More Perfect Marriages book are something that we call the slow fades. And a
Hmm.
slow fade is connection erosion. So our connection in our marriage starts to erode, but it's so slight that
Hmm.
it's like if a beach erodes, it's like the water comes in and takes out a few grains of sand, and it comes in and takes out a few grains of sand, and we wouldn't notice that, but if you look back at that beach 5 years later, oh, you see the change.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what happens in marriage. We have these slow fades that are causing this slow erosion, and maybe things feel a little off, or maybe they don't at all, but we're unaware of it. And one of the slow fades is the slow fade of child centeredness.
Hmm.
And so when we have been child centered for so long, and this especially happens in homeschooling families,
Right.
it was a huge issue when we were homeschooling. And so what happens is it's causing this connection erosion. And so then the children leave, and we've been so child centered, we don't realize that our marriage has suffered
Hmm.
because the children's activities, uh, working together to parent these children, that's how we kept connected. But now we don't have that in the same way. And we realize, wait a minute, there are some gaps here that need to
Hmm.
be closed.
Well, and that's why it's so important too, while you are homeschooling, while you are raising your kids in general, to take those times. We
Yes.
encourage people. David and I have always prioritized going away for weekends. Even when the
Yes.
kids were little, they would survive if we would go away, and we try to go away twice a year just to take time to be together, to pray about where we're going, to kind of recenter our relationship because it's real easy when you're down in the mud and the muck and doing the daily thing to completely lose sight of each other. And ultimately, we're now at this season where all of our kids are adults finally, and we have two grandkids on the way. And it's me and David. And I find that I like him even more than I did when we were younger because, I've had more years to kind of refine him and all that stuff. But I mean, we have a great time, but there were seasons when we were absolutely just going on parallel paths as fast as we could.
Oh, absolutely. And I think raising children alone, with, even without the homeschooling piece, raising children
Hmm.
alone, it's busy. It's
Right.
super busy. And then you add in the homeschooling piece, and we're so focused on the kids. But really what we need to be is not child centered. We need to be marriage centered.
Yeah.
And our kids need us to be marriage centered. Like because when mom and dad are okay, their world is okay. Like we are, that we are like the foundation of the family.
Right.
And so that makes all the difference in the world for them. Now, some kids don't make that easy. I mean, I had one child that was really, he had like severe separation anxiety,
Mm.
and sometimes they don't make it easy. I'll
Right.
never forget, as I was getting ready to head out for a weekend with my husband, and he's standing at the door with his nose pressed against the door going, "Mommy, don't weave me, don't weave me,"
Oh.
And I'm thinking, oh goodness, this is so hard.
Yeah.
And yet I had to remind myself, I know what's best for him. He doesn't know what's best for him. And what's best for him is that I do take time with his dad, that his dad and I have no kid time so that we can maintain our connection. And
Right.
so sometimes we really have to be the parent when we've got a kid that doesn't make it easy for us to take that time. But we have to also find just regular connecting rhythms in
Mm.
marriage in the midst of raising a family and in the midst of schooling a family. Where can you find a daily connection with your spouse? And maybe, my husband and I used to do it after dinner. We would do 15 minutes after dinner. If it was summer and we could sit out on the porch swing, we would go out there, and usually we'd ask each other two questions. One question was, how was your day today? And the second question was, what do you need for tonight? Like, what are you
Mm.
hoping the evening has, for us? And so that way we could talk about expectations or desires or needs and be ahead of the game and be
Right.
working together as a team. And so that little 15 minutes like saved us so many arguments or disappointments and frustrations. Plus, it allowed us to make some connection.
Mm.
And so that, on top of, maybe a date night once a week, every other week, even once a month, those kind of rhythms that we need to put into, because if we wait until there's time, there isn't time.
Right.
We have to put that on the schedule first, and then we work around it.
Oh, absolutely. And the connection points that you were talking about there, especially the looking at what their expectation is absolutely genius, because there have been so many times where I know that we have been going into just a normal day or a
Yes.
normal evening or whatever, and we'll get so sideways over something really, really dumb because I had an agenda and he had an agenda and they were not going in the same direction.
Yep.
And I sadly, I never have thought about, I should just ask him,
Yeah.
let's just proactively talk about it. That's genius.
Yeah. It makes all the difference. My Mark and I call that pushing information to each other.
Hmm.
So when we push information, what we're saying is, almost like, as you go into a holiday, you might say, you know, hey, I'm just want to make sure we're on the same page as we go into tomorrow. This
Hmm.
is what I'm thinking it's going to look like. Are you thinking anything differently? That's all it takes, even going into just a Saturday. Like, because oftentimes Saturdays I have something in my mind that I
Yeah.
want to, and he's got something in his mind, and they're not looking the same, right? And so even on something like that, like, just how are we going to use our weekend?
Right.
It's so helpful to say, this is what I'm thinking about for tomorrow. Is there anything that you're thinking about that we need to like put our heads together on
Yeah.
here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because so often if you don't talk about it, you end up having this tug of war and nothing gets done. And so you're
Yeah.
both just irritated as can be. And the kids see it. It's a wasted day. And so that is just that is a genius takeaway. And I appreciate your putting that out there for us all. That's
Good.
worth the price of the whole podcast right there, everybody. And it's funny because it's always those simple, like, why did I never stop to do that? Why did I never think about that? It's those simple things that you get in droves when you go and you talk to somebody else. You get counsel, you get help, because
Yes.
they are able to just say in passing little things that you're like, whoa, 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 what was that?
Yes, you are exactly right. It's like getting just a little different perspective or somebody who has a slightly different experience and then they can share it and really sometimes the biggest things are the littlest
Yeah.
things, right? That somebody mentions in passing or like a mentor might share with you. It can make all the difference in the
Mm.
world.
So true, so true. Well, Jill, I have so enjoyed talking to you today, but we are about out of time. So I want you to tell us where everyone can find you. And also, I know that you have a free marriage crash course. So I want you to
Yeah.
tell us about that, and also a little bit about just the coaching that you do and how families can get involved with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all you need to do is go to markandjill.org, markandjill.org. And once you're there, you'll see the marriage crash course. It is right on the front of our website. And so it's a free little crash course that you get by email. And and that's where you can also find you'll see a drop down for our coaching, for our speaking. We also have curated content on our website. So if you click on the moms tab, it'll have a drop down and it'll be for moms of newborns, for moms of
Mm,
preschoolers, for moms of grade schoolers. And then same on marriage. If you click the marriage, it'll say for happy marriages, for hurting marriages, for
mm.
marriages dealing with broken trust. And then when you click on that, it'll take you to all of our podcasts on those topics, all of our blog posts on those topics. So it's a great library of resources on our website as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I'll make sure that we include all of those links in the show notes, because I do want to make sure that that people are able to easily connect with you guys. I think that you'll be a great resource for our family. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thanks for having me, Leslie.
Well, you are welcome. And to everybody else, I do encourage you to check out Mark and Jill's resources. They have so much great content on their website. Their crash course is amazing, and it will be eye opening. It'll be just kind of whet your appetite to start thinking in a new way about your marriage. And so I really encourage you to take the time to go through that. Like I said before, there is no relationship that is worth investing in more than your marriage, because that is the foundation of everything else in your family. So connect with Mark and Jill. Again, I will have all of their links in the show notes. You can go to markandjill.org and get those resources anytime. And then consider how you can invest in your family. Teach them diligently. A lot of couples will come to teach them diligently, just the two of them. They use it as a marriage retreat. They go, they learn, they have a great time together. They get on the same page. They make new friends. It is a wonderful time. So if you've not thought about coming as a couple, I really encourage you to do so. We have so many things that are, so many workshops, so many opportunities for each of you individual, and then a lot of things for you to do together. And I think it would be a great time for you to come learn together, be challenged together, grow together, and then spend the times in the evening just really reconnecting and investing in your relationship. So you can learn more about our events at teachthemdiligently.net/events, and we would love to see you there. So I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.